Welcome back to another installment of Ask Eddie and Ann. As you can see, things are a little bit different this time around, except here's a dead giveaway. We're both drinking coffee, so I think you know what time of day it is.
Believe it or not, it's chamomile tea.
And okay, chamomile tea. I'm doing the coffee thing. Ann, you are in your usual location, but I am not, as you can see. I am up on your old stamping grounds. I am on Queen Anne Hill in Seattle, overlooking the Puget Sound, where I am hosting Noir City, Seattle right now. And of course, I forgot my normal microphone that I use. So this not only will be looking different for people, it will be sounding different as well. But there you go. There's no off switch right now. It's just like, let's go introduce more movies and let's do another installment of Ask Eddie and Ann. So we're doing it. How's it going, Ann? Are you awake?
Yeah. No, I woke up like at 4:30.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's kind of my normal time. So usually on Saturday I sleep a little later, but I wanted to work out this morning. So
You're way ahead of me. I people will forgive me if I don't have my usual long-winded answers today because I haven't showered yet and I have to get cleaned up and get to the theater, and it puts me on a little short schedule today. So
let's go. From a loyal supporter, have you set dates and locations for future Noir City events in 2023?
I noticed, Ann, you're front loading all of these questions this week. We have set some of the dates. We don't know exactly how many dates there are going to be, but we certainly are doing that. The one that everybody asks about that we don't have anything definite on at this point is the Hollywood Los Angeles Festival, which is, we're going to do it somewhere and sometime. We're just not exactly sure where because I remain loyal to the American Cinematheque, which started all of this, in the last century. So they're having the Egyptian Theater on Hollywood Boulevard, where we normally do the festival, is being renovated by Netflix, which now owns that facility, and it just seems to be a little behind schedule. So that's where we want to do it, and it just remains to be seen when that's going to reopen. We've talked to them. Everybody wants the Noir City Festival to be one of the first events in the newly renovated theater, but it just remains to be seen. If the plans fall way behind, we're probably going to shift the venue to the Aero Theater in Santa Monica. But none of this has been decided yet. What I do know is, and I think I'm going to be answering some other questions that are coming up here with this answer. I do know that we're going to be in Chicago in late August. These have been posted on the Noir City website and the Film Noir Foundation website, right? So Chicago again in August, and Washington, D.C. in the middle of October, which is actually Silver Spring, Maryland, not Washington, D.C. Those we're definitely doing. And it looks like we don't have, it won't be this year, but we will be going back to Portland. And it appears as of the moment, this might be news to the venue itself, that we're going to do Philadelphia.
Oh,
Probably in later July of this year. So a lot of people have asked about a festival in Philadelphia. And I think the way these are going to work, especially if it's a first time city, is it'll probably be a 3-day festival with starting on a Friday, ending on a Sunday, with 8 movies over the weekend and a double bill on Friday night. So I think that's how it's going to go. And I expect there will be some other things. Austin was a little up in the air because our usual venue, the Alamo Drafthouse Ritz, closed, and we don't have another venue at the moment. I know that someone wrote in and asked, I think it was Claire, who was in Austin, wanted us to come back there, which I would be happy to do. but I don't, and she suggested a cinema at which I don't have any knowledge or contacts with people there or anything. I mean, the way it generally works, of course, is a venue reaches out to us and we kind of establish, a working relationship. Um, and I generally don't go in cold, like go in and say, do you want us there? We want the venue to reach out to us and say, we want to do the show, because then it just speeds everything up. So that's that. No plans at the moment for New York. It's just been very difficult to find a venue that works out in New York. I hard to explain why, but that's just the way it is. So Philadelphia is going to be close to New York. So if you're in New York and want to do it, you can take the train down to Philly.
Okay, so we can skip to question 5.
Okay, yes, all
You
the
answered
first four
questions.
were
Good job.
yeah. Thank you very much. And question 5 is from Steve in Exeter, New Hampshire, and he says, "Who would you say was the most creative director of noir during the classic period? Creative in the sense that they could have done much better if the times they were living in didn't hold them back." Well, now that's an interesting question, because when I read that, all I can think about is directors who were blacklisted, because that was the times, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not, but something about Steve's pointed exclusion of the blacklist or the politics of the time make me think he's talking more about Hollywood or something about the culture at large that the director didn't fit in. I may be reading this entirely wrong, but I mean, without question, the guy that first pops to mind is Abraham Polanski, because he only really got to direct the one movie, Force of Evil, before he was blacklisted, and so he missed a huge chunk of his career there, because he didn't want to stay in Europe like Jules Dassin and Joseph Losey and John Barry, and he wanted to come back like Edward Dmytryk, who left and came back. But unlike Dmytryk, he refused to name names, so he never actually got another directing job until the late 60s. So yeah, certainly I think he was impacted more than anybody else, and his ideas for how to make movies were very different from the ideas other people had at the time. So he was definitely trying to do things differently. And would he have succeeded were it not for the blacklist? I don't think so, but it would have been interesting to see, and not to go on too long with this, but obviously Orson Welles was a director whose personal style conflicted so dramatically with the powers that be in Hollywood that although he has a terrific resume, I just think that same kind of deal. He was a little too innovative and too ahead of his time to have the career of somebody like a Michael Curtiz or a Robert Siodmak or somebody like that. That's it. You got any ones that you think of, Anne?
Well, it's not a film noir director, but I think Preston Sturges is a really good example of that. Someone who I think he was ahead of his time, and it would have been really interesting to see what he could have done now, or even in the 60s or 70s, just because his style was so unique. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, he has a pretty solid resume given, it kind of dwindles out. He had his issues at the end of the 40s there. Yeah. But funny that you bring him up, because, I just got I get such a charge out of When I Can Show Unfaithfully Yours at a noir festival, which I showed as the late show last night here in Seattle. And it never fails to bring the house down. I mean, it was, it's a very healing thing to hear a full house of people post-pandemic laughing uproariously.
Yeah.
Some spoil sport in the crowd will say, oh, spreading COVID, laughing, wear your mask when you're laughing. But it was just fabulous, because you could, that movie makes people so helpless with
Yeah.
laughter that I was like working in a little alcove next to the auditorium, right? And it was the last show. And the movie builds, and it was
Mhm.
so fascinating because I know it so well now. I don't even have to watch it. I can just
Yeah.
hear the audience, I hear the movie and the audience reaction. And, by the time it gets to the third segment of his contemplating murder, I mean, the laughter is just infectious and uproarious, and people are helpless. I mean, it's fabulous. So, cheers to Preston Sturges.
Yeah.
All these 75 years later, that movie still rocks a house.
Yeah, I mean,
great.
it is incredible. And I think that that's because it, kind of reminds me of Jack Benny, where it's very rooted in how people really are. And that's what makes that whole thing so funny, where he's going through these different scenarios, or one where he's all noble and lets him go, and another where he dramatically kills himself, and then finally he's like, no, screw it, I'm going to kill my wife. And that's the plan he settles on.
Yeah.
And
darling, you did not play Russian roulette with your father. It's fantastic. And I, Rex Harrison is so incredibly great in that movie because not only does he do all the physical comedy so brilliantly with a straight face, but his verbal acrobatics with Sturgis's dialogue, it's just tremendous. It's one of the great comedic performances, but he plays it completely straight.
Yeah.
Just like he's a buffoon. I mean, he makes an idiot of himself, but he never winks or looks like he's going for a laugh. He's just, man, that movie is funny as hell.
Yeah, and I think Sturgis too, because you see this in the Lady Eve, is if a man doubts a woman or is kind of crappy to her, boy, do they get utterly humiliated in the third act.
Yeah, and it's funny that he's so good because the humor in The Lady Eve is so much more sophisticated than the humor in Unfaithfully Yours.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, you're amused and charmed by The Lady Eve, where you're just helplessly guffawing at Unfaithfully Yours. So anyway, good answers, I thought, for that one. Okay.
So we're on 6. Could you please tell me why 77 Sunset Strip is not available in English to purchase the DVDs? That's from Janie.
I'm glad you're a fan. Is it Janie? Janie?
Janie.
Janie? But I don't know. And quite honestly, no offense here, but I'm not the best source for people to write in and say, why isn't this available on DVD or what's going on? I mean, I kind of know what Kino, Lorber, and Criterion are up to, but the companies, because I know people at those companies, but beyond that, I don't really know what the plans are for digital publishing of these titles. And I definitely don't know what it is in the UK unless somebody reaches out and says, would you consider doing a commentary or something? Then I know the film is going to be coming out, but otherwise I do not know. So nobody has reached out to me about 77 Sunset Strip, nor will they. So I don't really know the answer to that, except, I can suppose that it's the same as everything else, that, that was a Warner Brothers show. That was a Warner Brothers television show. And, they may not have rights to distribute that in Europe, whereas they might have them in North America. I mean, that's usually the case for why something appears in one region, but not another. It's just because they don't have the rights. But don't take my word on that. That's just a stab on my part.
Yeah.
Okay. So, our pal Doug in Silver Spring, Maryland wants to know if the James M. Cain estate ever brought suit against Warner Brothers for plagiarizing Double Indemnity when they made Body Heat. And if so, was it settled out of court? I don't know much about the James M. Cain estate. I'd have to ask my colleague, Charles Ardai, who publishes Hard Case Crime, because he actually published Cain's last novel, The Cocktail Waitress. So he would know about what the state of the estate is. But my understanding is that that probably would not have been the case, because it was much earlier than Body Heat that Kane tried to bring suit against people who were copying the basic premise of Double Indemnity and The Postman Always Rings Twice. Because he tried, when he was in LA, he tried to get the Writers Guild to bring to bring it to arbitrate about these other knockoffs, what he called knockoffs of those two stories, and it didn't work. So that decision by the Writers Guild would have precedence, in any future case that was brought. So, that's one of those things, and I think it would be, and even when writers win those, like David Goodis winning the Dark Passage, was the basis of The Fugitive. Even when they win those, it doesn't really amount to much.
Yeah.
I think Goodis won $12,000 or something, and that was it, and stopped talking about it. But that was not a settled out of court thing. That was an actual decision that there was enough similarity that they had to pay, but they didn't make them pay very much.
Okay, so this is from Joe from Suffolk County, New York. The first time I saw the lineup, I almost fell off my chair when Julian advised Sandy, when you live outside the law, you have to eliminate dishonesty. For years, I've been listening to Bob Dylan sing Absolutely Sweet Marie, but to live outside the law, you must be honest, without knowledge of the Noir reference. The Dylan lexicon is full of references. Dylan is both lauded and reviled for this sort of thing. In all of our, what some call theft, others call influence, I stand on the side of celebrating influence and would love to hear your thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way, except when it's outright theft. But, there is an entire website dedicated to the noir influence on Bob Dylan's lyric writing. There's an entire website. I think if you just type in or Google Bob Dylan film noir, it'll probably come up, because, there's all kinds of references. I mean, especially Double Indemnity. He's borrowed a lot of dialogue from Double Indemnity and put it in his lyrics, straight down the line, baby, And yeah, I mean, I know that Dylan is a huge noir fan. So, when he had his radio show, I think on Sirius Radio, he would talk about noir stuff all the time. And he's done videos that are very noir inspired. So yeah, my attitude about that is, especially if it's cross-pollinating in different media, I don't see any like ripping off. And who reviles Bob Dylan? I don't know that anybody actually reviles Bob Dylan, but maybe people think he's overrated or something. Like Bob Dylan cares about that. But yeah, and we kind of focus on this in the Noir City magazine, where we're always looking for one article in every issue that discusses an artist in another media other than film or literature, who is doing noir. Like in the last issue, we had this thing about Paul Roberts, who was a musician, Sniff and the Tears. They did a song called Driver's Seat, and it was totally influenced by his love of film noir. And then he ended up becoming a painter and doing all these noir inspired paintings that ended up on book jackets of noir novels and things. And, so we did an article about him as a painter, just showing his noir influence. In fact, he was, to bring this all back together, maybe you planned this all, Anne. There was talk, I think, about him doing the poster for Body Heat, but it didn't actually happen. But that's a little sidebar in the article about him in the magazine. So yeah, those are my general thoughts. If it's inspired by, then I don't really I don't get upset. Like I've talked about Tom Waits, is hugely inspired by movies and film noir and everything, and a lot of popular songs are based on artists, like there's the movie Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, which was a
Yeah.
Warren Zevon song. And there's, Tom Waits is a lot of scripts have been based on, that have been entitled for his songs. But my personal favorite was his Invitation to the Blues, which is basically Fallen Angel. It's the movie
Yeah.
Fallen Angel. And I mean, he name checks actors and characters and things from the movie in the song, and it's like clearly that was the inspiration for that song.
Yeah, and we have a whole issue, like the rock and roll issue of Noir City
Right.
magazine, which you can get the back issue, noircitymag.com, or you can go to filmnoirfoundation.org for a link to it. And that was it, and that one's easy to see because you tell it's the rock and roll one because it's like the Rolling Stone magazine
It looks just
cover.
like Rolling Stone. Yeah. Had Henry Mancini, Tom Waits, Jim Morrison, and Johnny Cash were the cover boys. Yes.
Yeah. So you can spot that one easily. And I always love just it's a small detail in the novel Inherent Vice, but the protagonist's parents like to check into hotels using like names from film noir. It's really funny.
That's good. I like that. I should try that sometime.
Yeah. Let's see. It's your turn. Number 9.
Oh, okay. Okay. Bob from the Chicago area. Okay, so he says he takes a different view of Better Call Saul than we do. He says, I enjoyed the first 4 seasons, then it lost me in season 5 and 6 as it became too haphazard and discursive. What has been a revelation to me have been the foreign noirs, whether it be Narcos from Colombia, The Break from Belgium, or the Nordic noirs like The Bridge and Border Town. The most impressive TV show I've ever seen has been the 5 seasons of the Italian series Gomorrah. Any comments by either of you on whether you've watched any of these shows? I have a hard time sticking with a series. I mean, I stuck with Breaking Bad because I love Ray Seahorn and Bob Odenkirk so much. You'll notice I put her name first in that. uh, and I had already invested in Breaking Bad and all that stuff. But I have seen some of Narcos. I have seen some of The Bridge, but I have not committed to the whole thing. As everybody knows, my favorite foreign noir series was Babylon Berlin was my favorite. But now that I've got the MHZ network, I'm catching up with all kinds of stuff from all over the world.
I just
How
got
about you?
I just got MHC as well. It's gifted to me by a friend. So right now I'm watching Gray Zone, which is really good, where a woman that works for a company that produces drones has been essentially kidnapped, but she's forced to live in her own apartment because they need her access because they have a warhead and they're trying to figure out, what to do with it. So that's been really good. And then, I mean, I've just watched a lot of Danish noir stuff.
Of course you have.
Yeah. So like The Chestnut Man, which is on Netflix, I thought was really good. And I mean, I tried to watch The Bridge, but I kind of I hit a problem with it, with the protagonist, the male protagonist, who's a big actor in Denmark, who is the guy that was the lead in Pusher. And I just don't find adultery romantic. So I kind of tapped out on that.
Gee whiz, that's like one of the main tenets of film noir, and
Yeah, but in there, adultery isn't a good thing. Or,
yeah.
what I mean, isn't treated lightly. It's treated like a betrayal, that thing that it is.
Well, so I'm kind of sorry, Bob, that we haven't seen too many of the shows that you mentioned, but they certainly, I mean, they come with a great pedigree. It's pretty extraordinary how much of this stuff is being done now, and I do find in general that the foreign TV shows are a little more engaging and unpredictable than the American stuff that's being done. I'm kind of hung up on what Bob was, what he meant by saying the show got haphazard. I think, I wonder if he means that it would sometimes break off the main narrative to explore these detours, like an episode would follow one of the supporting characters instead of the main character. And I get how people can sometimes like it's losing the thread. Why, I'm not so concerned about Lalo as I am about, Saul or Jimmy. So like, why am I spending a 60-minute episode with this other guy? Are they just vamping for time to fill out a season? I get that, but I thought that everybody was so good in the show that and when it paid off with the unexpected, I'm always impressed on American TV when you can actually kill off a major character in a TV show. It's like, it's one of the few genuinely shocking things left in dramatic narrative. It is long form TV where it's like, oh my God, they're actually going to kill this character. So that to me was like astounding when and we're not going to spoil it, but
who it was. Yeah.
Who it was. But that was, I really enjoyed that in the show.
Okay.
It's our guy Michael in Post Falls, Idaho. He's coming in under the wire here with another question.
I'm currently reading Evan Pushak's new book of essays, Escape into Meaning. In his essay entitled The Comforts of Cyberpunk, he cites this definition of noir given by the poet April Bernard. Noir is romanticism embittered. The life of feeling that has been betrayed leads to the attitude and genre of noir. No one who loves noir is a cynic. Cynics never believe in anything in the first place. People who love noir are disillusioned romantics. I find this quote to be very enlightening as it's applied to film noir and would love to hear your comments about it.
What do you think, Anne?
Yes.
Are you an embittered romantic?
I am an embittered romantic.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I guess so am I. No, I think that really does kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think most of the authors of this type of fiction would qualify as embittered romantics, definitely. I mean, the hardcore cynics are the villains.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's kind of the reality. It's like, and that's why you're the villain or you're kind of the anti-hero because you've had it. Like you don't trust anybody anymore and I'm embittered, but obviously these characters all have a kernel of hope and optimism in them, and that's the tension of these stories. Is that gonna get crushed, or are they gonna somehow find some kind of redemption? I was going to say that today I think I'm going to talk about at the theater. I'm going to just mention because the audiences have been really great and very big, and how a lot of people, they want the noir to be so downer. They get very disappointed when it's an upbeat ending. They like that wasn't noir. But now I just think that because we're watching these, in this case 75 years later, it's really interesting that I think back then what was so bracing about these movies was that they didn't have to subscribe to the happily ever after thing. It didn't have to end well. So it was kind of a crapshoot as to whether the artist was going to go all out and you're going to have an end like, Lady from Shanghai or Crisscross or something like that, where that was what made it so exciting, was like, wow, I haven't seen that ending before. But now I think that, people are so embittered and so cynical now, just in general, that they are approaching these films like a release, like there's some comfort in watching these things play out 75 years earlier. That certainly wasn't the case originally. People were like, what's wrong with the people who make these movies? My God, why are they so pessimistic? Well, now you know why. a lot of these filmmakers were predicting this future, and anyway, not to get too heavy about it, but yeah, I do agree with April Bernard's theory. I mean, look at a guy like my buddy Elroy. I mean, he is the classic example of he pretends to be a nihilist because he's an embittered romantic. I mean, that's all there is to it, So, yeah, I agree. I agree, Michael.
Yeah, and it's so beautifully phrased, by the way. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, it was. I know you can't argue with it. Okay, so here is Rob weighing in. He says the Film Noir Foundation's restoration of Woman on the Run is truly an astonishing story. I agree. I wonder, since Eddie has seen other prints, whether the movie always had the climactic moments as they are in the restoration. I know exactly what he's going to come up with here.
Okay.
Where Dennis O'Keefe and Ross Elliott are fighting, and it keeps cutting to the same shot of Ann Sheridan on the roller coaster. And after she runs off, we see what looks like a freeze frame of Robert Keith, and we hear a shot. So basically, Rob is asking if that was done for the restoration for some reason, or was that in the original film? And was there more of an altercation between Dennis O'Keefe and Ross Elliott? I have never seen a copy of the movie that did not contain that awkward freeze framed shot of Robert Keith. And my guess as to what happened there was that they had lost him in the action when they were shooting the film at the Pike in Long Beach. Or no, I'm sorry, it was in I think it was either on Santa Monica Pier or Long Beach. I can't remember which. That when they were shooting, I think they just lost. They didn't get a pickup shot of him waiting and listening and reacting. And so they realized the way the scene was being cut, that they had to place him somewhere in proximity to the fight and to her. Like audience had to know where everybody was to set up the final confrontation and or final reunion, as it were. And they didn't have that shot. So I think they just took a shot that they did have and they stuck it in there, but it was a still shot. And I think they actually held it a little too long, because then it became noticeable that he wasn't moving. So it's not our place to alter the films, though, other than to restore them to what they originally were. So tempted as I was to say, let's shave off about 6 or 8 frames of this shot. No, we're not gonna do that. It is what it is. We want to restore the artifact as it was originally made, and there is no reason to think that that was in the original. It was just a screw up in the production of the film, and that's how they tried to solve it.
Okay, so Eddie, how can people help us restore films?
They can donate to the Film Noir Foundation. I mean, they can just come out to the movies if that's all they want to do, but they can donate to the Film Noir Foundation through filmnoirfoundation.org. And if they do donate $20 or more, they get the fabulous digital Noir City magazine. That's what I would say. How about you, Anne? How would you say they should do it?
They should donate. I'm glad when they come out to the festivals, because then they can see, part of our mission is showing things in 35 millimeter and restoring it 35 millimeter. And if you want the digital magazine, you also have to sign up on the email list.
And I want to give a big shout out to Seattleites Steve and Diane Mosley, who have been attending they watch this all the time. They watch us, and they're attending the Noir City Festival right now. And they, on opening night, they made a very nice donation to the foundation in the form of a check that they handed me over cocktails, which is it's the way I like to do business. So I thank Steve and Diane very much. They have been coming to the festival up here in Seattle probably from the beginning. And so fabulous. I thank them and all the other great folks who are donating at this festival and buying the merchandise and just coming out to see the movies.
Okay, so this is Ryan from Studio City adjacent. This is actually Valley Village, California.
Okay.
Just to specify his location, would you consider Rififi a film noir? What distinguishes a heist film from being noir or not? What would be some examples of heist films from the classic noir period that are not noir? I consider Rififi to be the best heist film of all time because it simply has the best heist. However, in terms of overall films, I slightly lean towards Le Cercle Rouge Just as Eddie refers to Chinatown as the culmination of the best detective films from the 1940s, I look at Melville's film as the Chinatown of heist pictures, and is very reverential to those early heist films, but does it with Melville's own distinct spin and with a clear appreciation of the genre.
Okay. Wow. Good one, Ryan. Yeah, I definitely consider Rififi to be a film noir because uh, in general, it's kind of hard unless they do a heist film from some completely weird perspective, like it's a comedy heist film or something. But even then, like I've shown Big Deal on Madonna Street as at the Noir Festival. Um, and there was that year where we did all heist films. I mean, generally, they're breaking the law and they're the protagonists of the movie. Ergo, it fulfills one of the essential ingredients of noir, in my opinion, is that the quote unquote bad guys are the protagonists, and there's a crime being committed. And, it just depends. I tend to not think very much of the noir, like, I wouldn't consider Ocean's 11 or something
Right.
like that to be a noir film, but if there's a certain degree of desperation involved in the commission of the heist, then it's like, yeah, it's just funny. Like I would not say that Ocean's 11 is a film noir, but I would say that Sexy Beast is a film noir,
Oh yeah.
right? With the big heist at the center of it, and so many great dangerous characters, and and Ray Winstone, that protagonist, it's one of the great you got to do one last job for me movies. So I mean that's kind of it. I mean, obviously I love the Asphalt Jungle. I think that's like the pinnacle, but I do like Rafifi a little better in the long run, but it's just whereas a lot of a lot of noir films are about this desperate isolated individual, in a last ditch effort to pull off this job. In a heist film, you get like 4 or 5 of
Yeah. And I think too,
them.
like with the Asphalt Jungle, like every single person involved with that heist comes to their destruction because of their personal flaws. Like I love that aspect of the story, which really makes it feel, I mean, with that one, I just really tend to think of it like I don't even really think of it as a heist film. I just think of it as a film noir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, and it's a world where like you're only I mean, I don't want to spoil the movie if people haven't seen it,
Yeah.
but I'm now just imagine I'm speaking in general terms. It's how noir is it that so many of these stories revolve around people whose redemption comes only through dying?
Yeah.
That's the only way they can redeem themselves,
Yeah.
and that's certainly the case in Rififi. I mean, it's uh, which is kind of why I love that film so much, and I hold it in a little higher esteem than the Asphalt Jungle. Is as great as Dix's final act is in the Asphalt Jungle. Uh, you know, I'm drawing a blank now on. I know Jean Zave is the actor, but the character's name. Um, his last act is just so spectacular, and Dassin just directs the hell out of it. And I love that stuff. It's like Harry Fabian in Night in the City. Like the only thing he can do to redeem himself is die.
Yeah.
That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, and I just want to say really quickly, I love Le Circle Rouge and highly
Yeah,
recommend to people
yeah.
if they haven't seen it to watch it. That is a great film.
Well, all the Melville Heist movies are really really good, and
Yeah.
and Ryan just nails it. He has his own distinct way of doing it, but he's very very reverential. You can tell that you know, he's the guy whose favorite movie was Odds Against Tomorrow.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? All right, so I'm going to move on here to a comment from Sharon, who says, I have just finished Jim Thompson's novels, The Grifters and After Dark, My Sweet, which I thought were great, described as Roman Noir. It's a term I wasn't familiar with, but which translates into black novels. Can you give me any background on the use of the term and where it came from? Not sure I've ever heard you use it. Well, I mean, it's obviously a French term, and it's essentially the literary equivalent of film noir, right? It's just a Roman noir. And the Série Noire, published by Gallimard in Paris, has been the standard. But years ago, my friend Philippe Garnier wrote an essay. He didn't. We published it in the Noir City magazine. He actually wrote it originally for a paper or something in France, kind of exposing the Série Noire as not the best translations of American crime novels. They tend to liberally butcher the books and change things around, and I mean, it's just weird. Like, I think in French, Raymond Chandler's The Long Goodbye, the title was translated as Apache Dancer.
Yeah.
Was the name of the book in France. So for all of the reverence that the French pay to American crime fiction, they haven't, according to Philippe, they haven't been that reverent about the way they actually translate and adapt the novels into French. I mean, so but I don't know what else I can tell you, Sharon, about except that I shouldn't be too critical on the French, because they clearly appreciate crime fiction more than any other culture in the world, I think. But they have their own way of dealing with it, So
Yeah. And I think I've said this before. I think that the thing that surprised me most is the French have some of the best adaptations of Agatha Christie's work, which is fascinating to me. I mean, I actually, with a few exceptions, I actually preferred them over, especially the recent English adaptations of her work.
I will quickly just give a shout out. I mean, it's so funny. I've discussed this many times with people, my colleagues in France, how it's just so weighed out of proportion with the number of crime authors in America who get translated into French.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't really go the other way. Like, there aren't many French writers who are translated into English because, we're a little ethnocentric that way. We don't think anybody else in the world can write except us. But obviously, Georges Simenon is someone who has been translated that everybody should read. But I give a big shout out to an author, late author, unfortunately, named Pascal Garnier. No relation to Philippe Garnier, but Pascal Garnier writes really great noir stories. And if you haven't read Jean-Patrick Manchette, he is also a classic. I mean, he and Melville, he is like the literary equivalent of Jean-Pierre Melville. And just those two off the top of my head, I highly recommend. And fortunately, I don't know, I can't remember the publisher, but there is a publishing company in the States that is now doing most of Pascal Garnier's novels, either as standalones or as anthologies, like three novels in one edition or something. And they're all really, really good. I mean, they're very, very similar to he's like the French. It's not really right to say he's the French Jim Thompson, but there's a feel there of the disaster that awaits these characters is pretty amazing. And there's also a real black humor to the books that I enjoy.
Yeah, and there also has been like a huge influx of Nordic, what they call Nordic noir, into which is kind of amazing. I would recommend The Chestnut Man, and all the Department Q novels are fantastic. And he's obviously a film fan, so he puts in like little film things in his books, which is probably another reason why I like him. You can tell he's really into movies.
Yeah. It is fun to read all this, watch the movies from all around the world and read the books that get translated from all around. You're right. I mean, there's far more Nordic noir available in the States than there is Gallic noir, shall we say. But anyway, it's all good. Keep reading. Okay.
This is from Joe on Long Island. Just watched Cry of the City and The Naked Street and wondered how many noirs begin with a bridge under the titles. Seems to be a few.
all the ones that don't begin with a big shot of the skyline of the city. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's basically it, right? I mean, those are the two standard openings, right? So yeah, the bridges are big. It's funny. Because we showed Sorry Wrong Number at the Oakland Festival recently, um, I became kind of fixated on the diorama that they used outside Barbara Stanwyck's window when she's, trapped in the bedroom. And now I start seeing that in all kinds of movies. Like it's virtually the same shot of the same bridge, whatever it was in New York. I forget. Some New Yorker will tell me what it was, whether it was like the George Washington Bridge or the Brooklyn Bridge or the Verrazano Bridge or something. I don't know which one it was, but now I'm seeing it everywhere. It's like there must have been like one standard backdrop that they used in all of these things, because it's the same one.
Yeah.
So anyway, Joe, I get it. Well, Joe on Long Island, you would know which bridge it is that's outside Stanwyck's, right? Because I forget where she lived in the movie. Was it Sutton Place or something? I don't know. I don't know what bridge you could see outside her window, but
yeah. Well, it's just like if there's like a monster movie and it's set in San Francisco, the climax is going to be the Golden Gate Bridge.
Well, it's funny, it's funny you bring that up, Ann, because most people assume when they see San Francisco, the movies all start with a shot of the bridge. Like Woman on the Run starts with a shot of the bridge. And everybody thinks it's the Golden Gate Bridge, but 9 times out of 10, it's the Bay Bridge, because you can't actually see the city, right? If you want to show the city and the bridge at the same time, you kind of have to make it the Bay Bridge, because in order to do that, you'd have to have the camera out in Marin County shooting across the bridge to San Francisco. And they didn't want to pay to send a crew out there to get that shot when they could just get it from San Francisco much easier. Just, I'm sure they would took their cameras up on the roof of the hotel where they were staying and shot the city and the bridge, right? And they said, everybody's going to think this is the Golden Gate Bridge, but it's not. It's the Bay Bridge. Yeah, I noted that a long time ago when in the very first Noir City Film Festival, when we showed all the San Francisco movies, it was like, the Golden Gate Bridge is vastly underrepresented in these films. Anyway, okay, last question now. And this is Joe again. I wonder if Joe is sneaking in 2 questions, because this is Joe from Suffolk County, New York, and that was Joe on Long Island. But maybe he's just moving around here, or maybe, I don't know. Is Long Island in Suffolk County, New York? I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm going to have to research that. Okay. Joe says, recently I enjoyed watching a documentary on TCM about Joe Karoff, the creator of the iconic images for West Side Story, Last Tango in Paris, and Manhattan, among many others. Mr. Karoff said that he realized early on that he did not like working for anyone, so he started his own studio. Did the poster artists in the classic noir era work for the studios, or were they freelancers? Which poster artists do you admire most? And who are your favorite Pulp Fiction cover artists? This keeps going. Hold on. Film noir is associated with the paintings of Edward Hopper. And I think of Dempsey and Firpo by George Bellows whenever I rewatch The Setup. Are there any other paintings or painters you associate with film noir? Okay, and thanks for the great show. YouTube channel alone makes me feel my donation is money well spent. Thank you very much, Joe. Okay, so the poster artists generally worked for the studios. They were in the studio art department, and only if they went outside to get a well-known artist, because most poster artists worked in total anonymity in Hollywood. But if they got like Norman Rockwell, who did the poster for The Razor's Edge, if they hired him, I mean, he signed the poster, and it was obvious that it was a big prestigious thing that Norman Rockwell was painting Tyrone Power. But in general, that was not the case, and American artists were never allowed to take credit for their work. They just represented the studio. So the one who was probably most known was William Rose, who painted a lot of the posters for RKO. So he is the guy who painted Out of the Past, which is, the centerpiece of my poster collection. So I'm happy to have that one. But, people, if you're in LA, go see Brian Light's poster exhibition at Cal State Northridge. because there's a lot of foreign posters in there, and in foreign countries, the poster artists were allowed to sign their work, and they had like a following.
Yeah.
So Italian artists like Luigi Martinotti and Anselmo Ballister were very well known, and French poster artists like Konstantin Bielinski and Boris Grinson. These were very well known artists, and there's no correlation in the United States for that. So yeah, it was in all the art departments, meaning the publicity art departments, had their own style, and very often the posters would be printed in a certain way. Like stone litho posters were big at 20th Century Fox, and Warner Brothers posters had a very specific look. They didn't use artists so much as they used photo montage, and they had a very specific kind of font that they would use on Warner Brothers posters. MGM was also a photo montage house, whereas Universal and Paramount and Fox, as I said, used art more. And the one sheets were generally painted, whereas the insert and half sheet posters were more photo montage. Anyway, that was a crash course in poster art stuff in Hollywood. So do you have any particular noir posters that you love?
I tend to really like the Belgian posters. I think they really tend to be really, really beautiful. But I like a lot of the Italian posters. And oddly, I saw a really beautiful one for the Columbo movie where he goes to London. God, it's a gorgeous poster. So I guess that actually played theatrically there, which is also very interesting. So yeah, you never know. There's a really beautiful, it's not beautiful, it's striking poster. It was a Polish poster for a French film, The Bride Wore Black. And that is like one of the most striking posters I've ever seen. So you can Google it and see it. We've actually used it before on our TV listings page when The Bride Wore Black.
It's interesting because I don't know. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know the whole history of this, but Polish poster art is different than anything else in the world. I mean, it's so much more abstract and like modern art, and it very often they do not have the necessity of showing the actors on the poster. It's more design driven with abstract art, like the Rafifi poster in Poland is like a skull with jewels coming out of it or something, and they don't care about the actors. Probably the most famous Polish poster is the one for Sunset Boulevard, where it's like Norma Desmond as Medusa, and her hair is like film strips and things, and it's not a rendering of Gloria Swanson at all. It's just an abstract rendering of the character. But I just love all that stuff, There are, even though I've done a book about film noir poster art, there are many people in the world that are far more expert on all this stuff than I am, including my friend Brian Light, and just wonderful people that I've met along the way, like Ira Resnick, who has a massive poster collection. He was a very well-known photographer who has a gigantic poster collection that he allowed me to peruse when I was in New York. They all, know much more about this stuff than I do. But thank you for the question, though. And yes, I know that famous Bellows painting of Dempsey and Firpo. You've seen it a million times. Even if you don't think you know what he's talking about, you've seen the image of the guy being like knocked through the ropes of the boxing ring. And
yeah. Definitely.
Actually, my friend Ava Gardos, who directed Budapest Noir, they had a copy of that poster in the movie, and it's now on her living room wall where she lives in LA. So every time I go and visit, I get to see this gigantic printed on canvas reproduction of that painting. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and of course, with that film, the thing to me that's always so striking is at the end with him and his wife, in the way it's just set up exactly like the Pieta, which of course has been painted by more than one person. But that always strikes me, just gives it such a resonance for the ending of that film.
It was a good movie. I wish more people had seen it, but maybe we'll rectify that starting right now.
Yeah, and also I just wanted to point something out that I always loved. The first time I saw Deep Red, which is a Dario, or for people that don't know, it's a Dario Argento film. It's a Giallo film, or Giallo, sorry, film. And there's just a scene where these two people are in a square and they're having this conversation, and you look behind him, and he did like a recreation of Nighthawks. It's so striking because it's like the curved cafe, and when you look closely, the people really aren't moving. They're just sort of staged in the sight. And I was just so shocked when I saw that movie because I was not expecting that reference, in an Italian horror film.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. And the reference to Hopper previously here was that Abe Polanski did give George Barnes a book of Hopper paintings when they were shooting Force of Evil, because he said this is how I want to deal with space in the film, the way that kind of, to capture that sense of alienation and loneliness that Hopper has in his paintings. Polanski was looking for that visual corollary in Force of Evil, and Barnes came through. I mean, there's a lot of it that does absolutely simulate those paintings. Anyway, Anne, that's going to have to do it for this installment, because I have 30 minutes to get myself cleaned up and on the way to the theater, so I can introduce They Live by Night, Raw Deal, Hollow Triumph, and Kiss the Blood Off My Hands. This was a first today, in that, completely by a fluke, I am presenting live the same film that is showing on Noir Alley today.
Yeah, that's kind of bizarre. What a coincidence.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So I said to people, hey, if you don't want to stay out late, you can watch it early on TV before you come to the movies, or skip the early show and stay late and watch it at the theater. So that's pretty cool. All right. So thank you, and I will talk to you very soon. And thanks everybody for tuning in. It really is a trip when I travel on the road and so many people come up and say, give my regards to Anne, because we watch you guys all the time.
It's so good to hear that. I'm glad people are enjoying this show and getting a lot out of it. Makes me happy.
It's
fantastic. And the questions are great that we get. We just get really fantastic questions.
Yeah, it's just that we get so many of them, we can only, do so much of this. I don't want to wear people out with like 3-hour marathons or something. So we'll do what we can,
Yeah,
and we didn't even get to, and this time, Anne, we didn't even get to talk about a couple of things, because I finally did see Pearl, which I enjoyed, and I saw Infinity Pool.
Yeah.
Which we have to talk about.
Yeah, we'll do that next time. And just so everybody knows, next week on Valentine's Day, I'm going to go see the new Marlowe film, so we can talk about that too.
Okay, I have not seen it, and I don't know if I will have seen it by then, but I know that people are going to have questions about it. So we'll deal with that.
Okay, well, good luck. And good luck. And we'll be back in 2 weeks.
Okay, Thanks. Fantastic. Okay, see you. Bye.
Yep, bye.